Welcome to episode 2 of Margins of Victory. I'm your host, Craig Pintens. Today, we had a fantastic conversation with John Weber, the athletic director at Colorado State University. We talked about his unique path to the chair. He came from the private sector, he's a Colorado State alum, founded their NIL collective. So, very unique background. And we touched on a number of great topics in this conversation. One being naming rights and how that can increase your revenue for your department. We spoke about Canvas Stadium, the record season they had from an attendance perspective, and some of the fan experiences that John has added in, and coming from a unique perspective of actually being a fan and a donor prior to that. So tune in. Thanks for listening and enjoy this conversation with John Weber. Welcome to episode 2 of Margins of Victory. Very excited for our guest today. We've got John Weber from Colorado State University. Very excited to have you on. By chance, John, did you at all listen to the first episode, or you still got that in your queue?
No, I actually did listen to the first episode.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was good to catch up and understand a little bit more about the point of view there at Maryland, and it was a good talk that the two of you had.
Well, that's good. Somebody's listening, so that is a good thing as we kind of get going. You've been obviously at Colorado State, been affiliated with Colorado State for a long time, took over as athletic director, roughly 18, 20 months ago. There's so many people that are leaving college athletics, including athletic directors, and you often hear, this isn't what we signed up for. And obviously you have a really unique resume for a college athletic director. What made you want to do that after you kind of retired as a CEO to kind of come back to Colorado State and step into that role?
And that background, what is becoming a little less unique. You look at
Yeah.
John Donahoe coming in to Stanford, here recently, and some other folks as well. And I don't think we're going to be the last, that we see come into a role like that. In terms of wanting to do it, it was an opportunity to help my alma mater. It's a special opportunity to do that. Certainly wasn't anything that was that I sought or anything along those lines, but an opportunity to come in and help this university. We're in a unique position where, and I don't know if we found another president and AD yet, but we have a president and AD that both are alums of the university at the same time. And at the FBS level, I think that's certainly rare, and even more rare. Both of us have been CEOs of private companies outside of the university as well. So we probably have a unique mindset, unique view on things a little bit. But it was really more about the opportunity to come in and help Colorado State, help our president, help our cabinet, help our community. Really uplift what we're trying to do from an athletics perspective. When we look at the overall institutional profile, we're a powerful school. We've got 270,000 alumni. We've got nearly 34,000 students on campus, highly ranked academics, R1 research institution, great city. And it's all there for us to be highly successful, and I'm proud to be a part of this.
Well, Fort Collins is a fantastic place, and have been there a few times for men's basketball and softball, and have enjoyed the time there. If you haven't been there, you need to get there because the downtown area is pretty special. In fact, I don't know if this is true or not, but Walt Disney modeled downtown Disney after Fort Collins. Is that correct?
That actually is correct. So my understanding is that the architect of some of that Main Street USA was from Fort Collins. And
Okay.
So there's several buildings there in Disneyland that are designed as direct replicas of what we've got in our downtown. It is a special place for sure. And,
so you need to get, if you haven't been there, you need to get to Fort Collins almost immediately and help some things out. You touched on that, and I think you touched on something really interesting with President Parsons and yourself, both coming kind of from the private sector, or what I guess people in athletics like to term the real world out there. How is there differences, or are there differences between kind of the real world and what college athletics is right now?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's one that I get asked somewhat frequently. Here's what I'll tell you about my background. I've been in the high tech industry. I was in the high tech industry for nearly 3 decades. And by and large, it was a part of very disruptive organizations, very disruptive industries, disruptive companies, disruptive technology. And if you look in college athletics right now, there's a lot of parallels with what I've worked through in my private sector career and what I'm doing now. It's certainly a lot more public job at the moment in terms of what I do with Colorado State and being very public with engagement with our fans, with our donors, with our students and faculty and everyone. So it's much more public. But in terms of the comparison between the two, they're very similar. I mean, at the end of the day, most businesses are people businesses, and it's who you surround yourself with and who you support, the culture that you build. And there's, frankly, there are a lot of parallels between collegiate athletics and private industry. The product is different, obviously. When I look at when I look at athletics, collegiate athletics specifically, we really exist to market the university. That's really why collegiate athletics, exists at the end of the day. And while it's also the most effective way to market a university, it's also the most difficult, because in order for it to be effective, you've got to win.
Yeah.
And the more you win, the more effective you are at attracting students, creating a phenomenal student experience. Creating value for our sponsors, getting our faculty and community involved and excited. It's a great way to do it, but it's a lot of work to do it right.
No, it absolutely is, and I think very often you hear that analogy of being the front porch for the
Mhm.
university, and again, nobody's really come up with a better phrase than that. Maybe you have one, but it certainly does uh, ring very true, especially when you're winning at a high level. Y- You obviously were involved in one of those changes in college athletics is NIL, and you were clearly involved as a donor and founded the Green and Gold Guard NIL collective. How did kind of building that from scratch really prepare you to step in? Because NIL has become something that is discussed ad nauseum at this point in college athletics, and certainly that experience had to give you a good fast start out of the gate.
No, it did, and it was at the base level, it was a great opportunity to engage with our donors, to engage with our coaches and our student athletes, and understand who they are and what they're trying to achieve, and then putting programs in place, on the as a third party on the outside of the athletics department to help give them the tools that they needed to be successful. So there's no doubt that it helped transition into the role that I'm doing now. I wouldn't be doing the role that I am, that I'm doing now, had I not done that. But it's an important part of the future of collegiate athletics. And while the Green and Gold Guard has now ceased operations, because revenue sharing is part of our future. It was a really, really good launching point for continued success here at Colorado State. It was certainly very important to our programs. We were able to get a football team into a bowl game. We were able to get our basketball team into a couple NCAA tournament appearances. So there's no doubt that it had a very meaningful impact on our student athletes and on our programs.
So as things have kind of shifted from NIL collectives, and then obviously they still exist in some places, but
Mhm.
as they've kind of shifted to the revenue sharing model, one of the things that you've come out with is wanting to be one of the first non-power fours, or the first to get to the 20.5 threshold, and obviously that threshold is going to continue to increase. How do you do that? That is a challenge, and as I've explained to donors, look, the 20.5 isn't something that everybody was given. There's only two ways to get there. You can either generate more revenue or reduce expenses. So how do you envision getting there?
Yeah, for us, there aren't enough expenses to reduce for us to get anywhere near that number.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's going to be, how do we generate more and more revenue with different streams? And it starts with our move to the Pac-12. That was an opportunity for us to uplift our brand. It's an opportunity for us to build a conference in a way that I think can be very differential, and there are some revenue generation opportunities there that may be unique to that conference that we're excited about. But then also, if you look at our university, there's a lot that we can do that still hasn't been done. We've got naming rights, we've got sponsorships that we can do that are not in place yet. But some of the other things that some other folks are doing, whether it's entertainment based, whether it's more really special donor experiences, partnerships. There's a lot that that we're going to be able to get done. It's going to take a collection of a whole bunch of things to get to that number. But when I look at maximizing rev share, I do believe at some point here that's going to be one of multiple different dividing lines of who's competing at the highest level. And when we look at the impact that athletics has on the university as a whole, it is important to Colorado State for us to compete at the highest level, both academically and athletically. And we've got to do our part within the athletics department to make sure that we're doing that. And if that's going to be one of the so-called dividing lines, we're going to figure out how to get there.
No, I think that's a key thing when people talk about realignment, and obviously it's always at the forefront based on what's happened in the last few years. You have to be at a certain point to have those type of opportunities. Let's dive in on a couple of things that you talked about there. One being the Pac-12. Obviously, you're basically reigniting a conference, which is a little bit daunting as members, and certainly I think for Teresa and trying to get everything going again. But how do you look at that as a unique opportunity, because you don't have to rely on what was always done in the past? And I think that's a fatal flaw that everybody in college athletics is beholden to, maybe even more so than the private sector, because it's like, well, this is the way we always do it. What are some, without revealing a bunch of state secrets, what are some things that the Pac-12 can look at differently as you kind of reemerge?
Yeah, we have an opportunity that does not happen every day, which is to join a new conference. And at the end of the day, we are building a new conference. This is not the Pac-12 that existed prior. It is going to be a new iteration of the Pac-12. And from the ground up, there are opportunities that we have in terms of how do we leverage the Pac-12 enterprises investment, the old Pac-12 network. There's a lot of value that can be created by that asset for the conference and for its member institutions. So we're really excited about what the future of that holds. And there's when you look at other conferences out there, there's a lot of work that's being done around sponsorship activities, partnership activities, and we'll be no different there. But really being able to start from the ground up and really build a conference with that monetization strategy and revenue strategy in mind, I feel gives us an advantage. And so all the member institutions, their presidents and their ADs, we're all very like-minded from that perspective, and excited about what the prospects are going forward.
Yeah, no, it definitely is a very unique opportunity in college athletics, and one that we haven't really seen happen in probably a long time. There's going to be somebody listening that's going to point out something that happened in 1957. I just don't remember that in particular.
Well, we were fortunate to be a part of building the Mountain West originally. So Colorado State was one of the member institutions that got the Mountain West built, and I may be wrong, but I think that may be the last one that truly out of
That's
the ground.
That's a good point. Yeah, the Mountain West was a kind of a collection of WAC schools, and I don't know how the WAC continues to they just get pilfered all the time, and they're still surviving, which is absolutely crazy. Let's focus a little bit, because you obviously can get revenue from the Pac-12, but then there's incremental revenue that can be generated on your own campus, which differentiates you within a conference. And you touched on one thing, and you've spoken publicly about trying to get naming rights for Moby Arena. What are the, how do you handle that from an institutional perspective? Is that something that Learfield is going to assist you with, their media multimedia rights holder, or is that something that is more on a university level when you're talking about a
Yeah,
naming rights?
I would say that that's something that's more on the university level. We're taking a view of university-wide partnerships and making sure that we're creating value for those that we work with. For a partnership to work, both sides have to win. Both sides have to find value, and that's what we're focused on doing, is creating those opportunities to work with sponsors, to work with people that we normally look as a sponsor. We want to look at them as a partner and create value for them in the same way that they would be creating value for us. And that's something that we've kicked off here in the last 4 months or so at the university level, and really excited about what the future of that holds. And when we talk about something like a Moby Arena in particular, I believe that is going to come out of that effort to make sure that we're finding the right partner to engage with us at the university level, and that would be one of the things that we activate to add value for them.
Well, it's a tremendous opportunity, and I think you're approaching it the right way, because far too often on any type of sponsorship, it's just that the sponsor writes a check and there's maybe a little bit of activation, but there's got to be some real value for the sponsor itself, or the partner in this case, because I think that's the right approach. And far too often, I think at the end of the year, it's interesting to talk to people in that space, because they dread having to work with an ad agency because they're fearful that the metrics aren't going to be there for a potential renewal. But if you're approaching it at the very start from a partnership perspective, obviously you're going to have tremendous opportunities.
Yeah, and it's all about creating value. We've got a history of doing that here at Colorado State. We did this with Canvas Credit Union when the naming rights went on our new football stadium that opened in 2017. And if you go talk with that leadership team, they will tell you that it was a tremendous investment for them in terms of the way that we brought a partnership to bear, and it's worked so well for them at Colorado State that they've gone to several other institutions within the state and have done maybe not something on the same scale as what they did with CSU, but have become partners with multiple other institutions in the state, because it absolutely has provided value for them. And that's a great model for us, and we'll figure out how we replicate that with Moby Arena.
Well, and if you haven't been to Canvas, it's a fantastic stadium. One of the newer stadiums, obviously, in college athletics, very well thought out. Would highly recommend getting to a game there. And I do think, John, though, if there are other people that acted on Canvas, you probably should get some residuals from that. So, being a good partner, I think they should talk to you more about that and figure out how you can do that. Well, let's touch, though, on football. You had record football attendance at Canvas last year. How does your perspective going to games when you weren't the athletic director, and I'm assuming you went to a lot of games as a big fan, how does that kind of shape how you view the fan experience? Because I think that is where there obviously is potentially that incremental revenue that everybody's looking at. And you touched on a little bit about it, but how did that perspective help shape what you wanted to do under your leadership with football?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. Here's what I'll tell you. When I get together with our team, we talk about every Saturday home football game. There's actually two games that we're playing. There's the game outside the stadium and there's the game inside the stadium, and we need to do everything that we can to win both of them. So it's really become a lot around entertainment, immersive experience, putting on as good of a show as we possibly can outside the stadium. Whether that be Ag Day, which is a tremendous event for us, and really a partnership all the way across campus with our agricultural college, and how we activate the tailgating area for that. And we've announced a snow days piece that we're going to do here in November, where we're bringing Altera as a partner down. We're going to have snowmaking equipment. We're going to have a rail jam out there, and just have a really, really fun experience for people outside the stadium, and obviously hope that transitions to inside the stadium, and working through what we've done with the stadium, one of the first things that I did is, realizing that I did not come from the world of college athletics, is make sure that I had a team around me that did. And we make really good partners with each other. Brought on people like Scott Sidwell, who was the deputy at Penn State. Christina Diaz came up from Monmouth. And Chris Ferris had been on the team already. Patrick McLaughlin came over from Georgia on our development side. But we've worked really hard as a team to figure out how do we create really good experiences for our fans when they're in the stadium too. And one of the first things that that Scott and I did is that we walked the stadium, and my knowledge of kind of where fans would gather and what lines were like and what the experience was like. We walked that entire stadium and talked about it. And that resulted in us adding 50 different points of sale to the stadium for our home football games. And it grew revenue by, goodness, probably 30-40% in terms of just making it easier for our fans to navigate the stadium and find concessions, and it created a much better experience for them, and helped us from a revenue perspective as well. So some of those insights, I will say, have been helpful, and it's great to have a team around me to help us work on that kind of stuff.
Well, I do think once you work in sports, when you go to another venue as a fan, you tend to look for all those things and wonder, well, if I was here, this is what I would do, and it's pretty unique to have that type of opportunity. Let's talk a little bit about the adding 50 different points of sale. I would assume then you're probably interested in kind of the per cap numbers of what does it look like from a fan perspective in terms of when somebody comes to a game, this is what we can reasonably expect from a revenue perspective. Have you dove in that deep, or are you getting into that type of analysis?
No, we absolutely do, and we've set. Let's see here. We had four. We hadn't had a sellout since 2018. We had four last fall in Canvas Stadium, and by far we set record concession numbers. Throughout the season last time, and as we played our first couple home games in Canvas this fall, we've continued to do that. So per cap numbers are absolutely up. There's no doubt about it, and we're working on that over in Moby Arena as well. We've got more of a dated arena there, but we're working with our partners on how we make that much more streamlined and much more engaging for those that are coming to that arena also. But yes, I absolutely look at things like that. I've got a background in data, and certainly I would quantify myself as a data geek a little bit. So those sorts of things are important to us, sure.
Well, maybe we can start some type of club, because I do like data myself, and maybe we need to find an creative outlet for that. We touched a little bit on the Pac-12, and I'm curious more as to how that, when you switch conference affiliations, there's a lot that goes into that. And this isn't necessarily a revenue question, but you have all these different instances where you've got Mountain West branding in different locations. Has that analysis started of, all right, we've got to put the Pac-12 here, we've got to, well, there's one, we missed that one the first time around. Has that already started?
It absolutely has, and whether it's patches or marks on uniforms, or stitched into the turf on the football field, or painted on the floor of Moby Arena, there's a number of places that we're going to have to go through and update that branding. But I'm not too daunted by that at all. We'll work our way through that, and coincidentally, we're actually in a good spot. It was time to replace the floor in Moby Arena. It's reached end of life after this season, so it's a good time for us to come in and do that, and it won't be bad stitching a new logo over at campus either.
Are you going to do something crazy with the floor? Is that?
That's a great question. We have not worked on that yet, but
Okay.
we'll do something. I just don't know what
Okay.
that looks like yet. We'll get onto that.
That's a key piece. When you have that on television, you got to make sure it pops on there.
100%.
So obviously the the move to the Pac-12 and obviously I think you bring a unique perspective along with President Parsons to just the state of college athletics. But what does success look like 5 years from now? If we were to, go in a time machine and have you as a repeat guest 5 years from now, man, I hope we're still doing it. That means this podcast became moderately successful. But what will that look like in 5 years in terms of success for Colorado State?
Well, here's what I'll tell you. We started off with setting the vision for Colorado State first, and that vision is to become the most loved, most watched, most innovative program in the West. And those are 6 short words, but really impactful. When you think about most loved, there's some obvious fan sentiment pieces there, but it's also how does our faculty think about athletics? What do our student athletes think about athletics? This is a place they treat as a destination that they come to, stay at, graduate from, come back to. Same with our coaches. Do they treat this as a destination? Same with our administrators. Do they treat it as a destination? Most watched, when we are competing, are we on over-the-air television? Are we on a streaming network? Where are we? Where are we competing? What's our social media engagement or footprint like? But also, what's in there is that people watch programs that win, and we need to do a lot of that. On the most innovative side, some of the finances come into play there, and how do we, we're talking about revenue on this podcast, so how do we find sources of revenue to help us achieve the goals that we want? But it also comes down to consumption of technology, of how well are we feeding our athletes? What does our nutrition program look like? If I've got and I use this with Coach Cohan, I used this conversation with Coach Cohan the other day, who's our volleyball coach. And, we went down to NCAA tournament down in Tempe and faced Texas A&M in the first round. And their front line was significantly taller than ours. So, if we're going to be faced, at some point we have to go compete against those programs. So, what are we going to do to not only compete, but win when we've got an opportunity on the national stage? Because that is incredibly impactful for us. So we saw that in the NCAA tournament this last year. We were 3.5 seconds away from making it to the Sweet 16. Had DQ not banked that shot in there at the end of the game. So there's finding ways for Colorado State to be really innovative, not just in revenue generation, but in competition as well is what we're focused on. And when we talk about 5 years from now, I've already mentioned we desire to compete at the highest level. So the desire is that in the next 5 years we will have played a CFP game. We will have made it to a Sweet 16. That's the thing that that I talk to all of our coaches about is that nothing moves the value of Colorado State athletics more than competing on the national stage and winning when we get there. And that's our focus. Getting there in the first place, winning conference championships to enable that opportunity, and then win when we get there is the goal. So really looking forward to how all of that comes together for Colorado State. It's a critical 5 years. It's a really, really critical 5 years for a lot of institutions, ours included, to make sure that we're successful and that we preserve the opportunity for CSU to compete at the highest level.
Well, that's a fantastic answer, John. We might not have to cut up a little bit of that to brand the Margins of Victory podcast, because I think you just talked about some of the margins of victory there when you gave the example of Colorado State, Texas A&M volleyball. So the last question, and this is really important. I asked the same question to Jim. I'm planning on asking this question to everybody, but unrelated to revenue, who is your all-time favorite athlete and why?
So, this one might surprise you a little bit, but my favorite athlete is Edwin Moses. And,
okay.
So
I didn't think I was going to get Edwin Moses today, or hear Edwin Moses. So what a star!
Yeah, Olympic hurdler. So I was, I played a lot of sports. Track and field and hurdling was probably my best. But he was competing at a time that I was competing in high school and had an opportunity to move on to Colorado State. But just what a phenomenal competitor. He was the first person, I believe, that got to the 13 steps in between each hurdle. Olympic champion, multi-time Olympic champion, and had over 100 finals in a row that he dominated and won. So I have a deep appreciation for how hard that race is and how hard that individual worked and how fast that guy was, and he did a lot of other great things for the sport as well. So it was an unbelievably impressive run that he had.
Well, he is arguably one of the most underrated athletes of all time. So that's a great mention. We'll give a lot of Edwin Moses love because he probably should have won 3 gold medals. I think the boycott in 1980, which would have been pretty crazy in one event in track and field, especially in the 400-meter hurdle. So great answer, John. I thought for sure we were going to get something Colorado themed, but Edwin Moses is a great answer. Thank you, John.
Unbelievable competitor. Yes.
Yeah, no, he was fantastic. Well, thank you, John. This has been very insightful. Appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule. Good luck against San Diego State. By the time this probably airs, we'll know the result, but we're all pulling for you.
Greg, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.